Are you lonely? I guess more of us will be at the moment, stuck inside with nobody to see. If you're like me, loneliness is something you try and run away from. You eat something, you watch Netflix or YouTube, or try and meet with friends. But in this time when the government's literally telling us to stay inside, perhaps we could see this period as an opportunity to try and form a new relationship with loneliness. What is this feeling and why is it so painful sometimes? In this video, I want to talk about two types of loneliness that I've had in my life and the things that have helped me be a bit more peaceful when I'm by myself and enjoy stuff like this, looking out the window. The first type is physical loneliness. This is probably familiar to you. Certainly it is a feature of my life, not only in this crisis. It's that feeling when you finish a day of work, you want to meet people, nobody's available, so you have to spend a night on your own when you don't want to. And this can be made worse if you struggle being by yourself, if you have thoughts that you don't like sitting with, or if you feel restless. This feeling of physical loneliness may be something that more of us feel in the coming weeks, but what determines this feeling? Because is it not weird that one night you can't think of anything better to do than just to snuggle up in bed by yourself, and yet the very next night you can't think of anything worse? And what about monks and hermits? They seem to be quite happy by themselves. I met this hermit in China. He's been living in that cave for 30 years. And look at that smile, he seems fine. This suggests that our loneliness is not a product of the amount of people that you see in a day. Instead, it's a product of how you think about yourself. Then there's the second type of loneliness. Physical loneliness's existential cousin. He strikes in the night and when you're alone with thoughts of, what am I doing with my life? Who am I? Why am I on this planet? I call this spiritual loneliness. Spiritual, George, what are you talking about? Well, by that I mean missing a sense of a connection to something bigger than ourselves, being more than just a brain and a bag of skin. I used to envy my Christian friends. When they're alone, they can feel the sense of God, a connection to something greater than themselves. I used to think that feeling was reserved only for the religious. If you were brought up mainly secular like me, in school we learnt the order of the planets, how big the sun was, but we never discussed who we were relative to these things. No, we were prepared for the world of work. But does this crisis not reveal how precarious it is to base our whole identities on our jobs, what we do, instead of who we are? In short, I think it's easy to feel lost in our world. I think it's a tough time to be alone in our noggins. Perhaps every generation felt they've got it especially bad. But even before this crisis, did the world not seem particularly unstable? The news is brutal, and unlike previous generations, we can inject that horror straight into our psyches before getting out of bed. And then there's a bazaar of comparison sites. Never before have human beings had so many ways to feel inferior. These may feel like new challenges to being okay when you're by yourself. But here's the surprising bit. The solutions, they can be ancient. When I spent too much time on my own 2 years ago comparing myself on Facebook and worrying about what I was doing with my life, I descended into anxiety. And the single thing that helped me the most was a book, the Daodejing, an ancient Chinese book written 2,300 years ago. It turns out that the ancient Chinese suffered from many of the same things that we do. The supposed author of this book is a guy called Lao Tzu, a friendly old wise man. And in it he gives advice to the ancient Chinese, and that advice really helped me. One of the big ideas that's helped me be by myself is appreciating the complexity in my life. Lao Tzu talks about trying to recognize the mystery of your existence. Because human beings, we have an uncanny ability to take almost everything for granted. Take something as mundane and regular as breathing. You've probably done it a couple of hundred times already today. But if you think about it, it is pretty remarkable. Our lungs are snatching oxygen out of thin air. Do you remember that fact that we learned in school, that if you were to spread your lungs out, it would be the size of a tennis court? I can't remember my reaction as a child. It probably was like, meh, that's a cool fact. But if you think about it, that is pretty nuts. We have this fantastically complicated apparatus that's keeping us alive. And so appreciating a bit more about yourself, the mundane, the regular things that fade out of our conscious awareness, it puts the more negative thoughts about yourself into context. So when I would have the more damaging thoughts about, I don't want to be alone, I don't think I'm good enough, I would then remind myself that there's a lot of things I don't appreciate about me and so to give myself a bit of a break. So you can appreciate the complexity about yourself, but then also the world around you. Trees, they're nuts. Qingdo, come on. Yes, hello baby. And this is Qingdo, Wu Ming's dog. Isn't the creative intelligence of life on this planet quite extraordinary? And while my eyes may be more firmly in my sockets, we're basically made of the same stuff. And Lao Tzu talks about how we're different expressions of the same energy, the same intelligence on this planet. It's not like human beings, we just appeared on a dead alien planet. No, we're kind of like at the pinnacle, at least from the organisms that we know, of a whole realm of intelligence on this planet. Recognizing this, I could see some of myself in nature and in dogs like this, and it made me feel that sense of connection that I once envied. But the details are not particularly important in this video. My point is that philosophy, self-help, meditation, mindfulness, all these things work. They've worked for me and they've worked for millions of others over literally thousands of years. And why do they work? Because we have an inbuilt philosophy about how we think about ourselves and the world, and it can go unchallenged for a whole lifetime and cause you suffering all the way to the grave. But the way that you think about yourself and the world isn't the only way that you can. And so when you read a self-help book, that author is sharing their 20 years of life experience that you get to absorb in a few hours of reading. So you don't have to make the same mistakes that they do. And then take the Daodejing. Supposedly it's the accumulation of literally hundreds of years of Chinese wisdom. And so when you read the Daodejing, you get an insight into a different way of thinking about yourself. And then you can choose what is the most empowering for you. So if I could suggest one takeaway from this video, that would be to see this time of crisis, which is obviously really difficult for our society and our loved ones. 5 of my family have the virus, just mental. But to see this time of crisis, when you're spending a lot of time by yourself, as an opportunity to form a new relationship with you, a more peaceful one. And if I could suggest 3 things that might help with that process, one is to spend 5 minutes, maybe after this video or today, being curious about how you're feeling. If you're feeling lonely, anxious, depressed, stressed, restless, try and sit with it and explore how it feels. You'll find that if you accept the fact that you're feeling down or whatever it is, that suddenly that headspace doesn't seem quite as scary. And then maybe read some philosophy. I've linked down in the description some of the books that have helped me the most, and compare the way that you talk to yourself against what the authors of the book say, and then choose what works for you. I hope this work helps with your spiritual loneliness and your physical loneliness, because you're not running away from yourself. But I don't know about you, I don't particularly want to be a monk, maybe for a few years, but I like having friends, I like being social. And it's something I'm working on in my life. When I was back at home, there probably were people I could have called, but I didn't want to seem like a loser with no friends. But in this time when literally everyone's bored by themselves, maybe take it as an opportunity to contact someone you haven't talked to recently and organise a coffee over FaceTime, something like that. We could volunteer and help the vulnerable in your community. There are just some ideas, but yeah, take what you will from them. Oh, well done, baby. You're so cute. So are you lonely? I guess more of us will be at the moment. But in this time when you're spending more time alone, perhaps you can see it as an opportunity to form a new relationship with you. Go forth and be curious, my friend. You'll be surprised what you can learn.